We soon grew used to living entirely in these hyper-saturated worlds. No one wanted to stay in what was now known as the blandscape. The blandscape was a dark place where you visited to fix a setting or finish an upgrade. I guess what interests me is just, the world that we're living in right now is changing really, really fast, and I don't think anybody really knows quite where it's going. And we've had a lot of dystopian science fiction, and a lot of it's been really great over the past years, but I also think that that's sort of directed the way that technology's moved.
So I've always been interested in the intersection between arts and technology, and I'm particularly interested with robotics because as the AI and technology gets more sophisticated and gets more in the public eye, people's impressions of robotics become important. And a lot of the stories about robots are things coming from Hollywood and in films which are very untrue to what's actually being done in the research community. So I was very interested in working with Rebecca to be able to tell stories that are faithful to the real research and the real motivations of actual robotics researchers.
Maybe that's why we were too distracted to notice in time, when we could still perhaps have made a difference.
I think one of the things that we found through this project was that most engineers and computer scientists are really lousy at explaining what they do to people who are not engineers or computer scientists. So, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we went ahead and developed the 6-word story workshops for this audience, because we wanted to give the PhD students and postdocs and actually even some lecturers the opportunity to sort of learn how to express what they're doing in very high-level, simple terms.
So, the roots of engineering and technology, I think, really kind of comes from the ability to imagine. With the workshop, one of the ideas was to get people to sort of reverse engineer things that are in our everyday lives. So I had them describe the internet without using any of the sort of words associated with the internet. And we came up with some really good ones, like was made for war, now shows cats. And these are all kind of ways of describing what it does and what it is and how it affects us in our daily lives without actually saying, it's about communication and satellites and information being transmitted around. So using the same concept, we then transitioned into their own research.
It's what the story does, and challenging them to become interested in what we're doing. So
it was getting people who were researchers and are working all day in labs and working with very complex topics and very abstract subjects and very technological subjects to think about their work in less jargon-heavy, more communicative, more fun ways.
And it's really incumbent upon scientists and academics, I think, to come up with ways of communicating to other people.
You have a space that isn't necessarily just about your work, but is also about listening to other people and creating something. So that process of creation allows you to kind of generate ideas.
So one thing that's been really helpful for me is thinking a lot more about public engagement and the impact of the kind of research that we're doing in my lab. We worked together to do this exhibit of the robotics research going on around King's, and that really forced us to think about what are the essential elements of the research that we want to communicate, and how do we communicate that to a public audience. But that's helped me as I've sort of moved through the rest of the year to think about ways in which, as I write about my research, both for a technical audience and a more popular audience, how can I capture those ideas and communicate them more clearly.
The visual work is a series of collages that's inspired by pop arts and Dadaist movements in the 1960s. And really it's using adversarial images which are misclassed by artificial intelligences, which to us look like just really strange and beautiful patterns. But an AI will look at this and classify it with 100% certainty as being a dog or a cat or a pancake or a rifle or whatever. So the kinds of things that Rebecca's interested in are exactly these false things. They're things that the network thinks they're cups, but they're not actually cups. And when we as humans look at them, we might say, this looks nothing like a cup. Why would the network think it's a cup? Well, there's something inherent in the arrangement of the pixels in the image that makes the function inside the network think they're cups, even if they're not actually cups. So it's almost like a hallucination on the part of a neural network, like they're seeing something which isn't really. This is how I thought of it anyway, in a kind of poetic way. I think that the idea that the AI is taking on its own force and becoming its own thing, an entity almost that we don't really understand, is very much a part of the work that I've done. I think there's a lot of black boxes, especially when it comes to neural networks and deep learning, and we don't really understand what's going on. We've got AI that talk to each other in languages that we don't quite understand. But what happened next, no one had anticipated. Like a primitive map, the edges of our world began to curl up. It's been really, really fantastic to be able to, I think, have ideas and then to come and just talk about them freely with people in the research groups. I know that they're always going to have something interesting or a new perspective on whatever idea I have. I think when you start to write things like science fiction, you can kind of meld concepts in a way. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but you have to be at least aware that you're mixing concepts and you're kind of projecting something which doesn't necessarily exist now and might not be able to exist in the future. There's no other way to put it. First they turned grey, then they grew lighter and lighter. They grew lighter and fainter, and then just disappeared. And what was left was a white blank expanse spreading out in all directions.